Welcome back to another episode of the Life in the Right Lane podcast. Victoria and Nicholas here, and we actually just got back from a decently long trip up the East Coast. We went to DC, Baltimore, Maryland, and then ended in Philadelphia.
Yeah, it was a really good trip. First time both of us have been on a plane in some time.
First time being on a plane married.
That's true.
So that's
changes the experience drastically.
I feel like throughout this first year of marriage, everything that has happened, we've thought about it in the frame of this is our first time doing this married. And we're quickly running out of things that we haven't done not married.
Yeah. It's the little things, the little milestones.
Yes.
But it was really good to take time to see people in person. And we feel like, we've gotten to a point where it's fine to go see people and got to see family and friends. And very rarely do we have a trip where every single day is meaningful. But I felt like every day on our trip was meaningful. And it really pointed to how important it is to be present in every single moment. And that's probably why so many trips and so many moments in our day are not meaningful, is because we're not present enough when it's happening.
Yeah, that's very true. Nicholas the other day asked me how long I spend thinking about what could happen in the future as opposed to thinking about like what I'm doing now. And I said, probably like a good 60%, like more than half of my life I spend thinking about what I need to do, what I'm supposed to do, what I'm going to do tomorrow, what I'm going to do this weekend. Like I'm a planner, so I'm always thinking about what's coming down the pike, but it's hard for me to take a step back and really live in the present. But
yeah, it is so hard. I agree with that. And a lot of our energy and anxiety is spent on things that are in the future and have not happened. It's interesting if you catch yourself doing that and you say, no, I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing right now. It's almost like there's a weight that's lifted off your shoulder. And it's funny to realize that happening and change your perspective, because it's all in your head. It's not necessarily what is actually occurring. It's not like you're overwhelmed by things that are happening right here. It's stuff that's in your head. So it's important to find those moments where you can push the future away, because we're not guaranteed the future, and focus on the present. But I felt like we were able to do that on our trip. And I look forward to trying to implement that more in my daily life.
Yeah, I think because we're introverts, which is sad that we both are, but for being introverts, well, just because it could be easy to stay inside all the time and not ever get out with anybody. But because we both get drained a little bit more from being around people and socializing all the time, you would think that coming off of a trip where we spent like every waking moment with people, and for me especially, I hadn't met any of these people because Nicholas lived up in the Northeast for a little bit before he moved back to Nashville. So he was introducing me to everybody, and you would think me especially would be so drained from having conversations and keeping things going with people I don't know. But I think because I wasn't worrying about what was going to happen the next day, who I'm going to meet, what I'm going to talk about with them, what's going to happen, where are we going to eat, where are we going to go for dinner, like all these things, I just was making a point to not think about it. And I think that's very helpful, being conscious that you do that, because then you're able to reset your mind and refocus on the things that are important in that moment. And for me, that was, for this trip, really focusing on the people that I'm meeting and getting to know them and Nicholas's life when he was up there. So coming off of that trip, I actually I wasn't drained. The only thing that I was tired of was traveling, which naturally so. But I was so surprised getting back into work and being like, wow, I'm really not drained. Like when people were asking about our trip. And I really think it was thanks to resetting my mindset and letting the Lord help me focus on the things that were important in that moment and really being present in those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, praise God for that. It was a great trip.
it was.
So today we're talking about working for God. And we've talked about this before
Mhm.
on the podcast. It's been about a year probably.
Really?
Maybe a little bit less than that. But it's an increasingly important topic. And I know it's something that just kind of feels like, oh, do everything for God, not for humans.
Mhm.
Try to focus on Him. He will give you strength. It'll all be good. He'll give you blessings. There's so many places that we could go that are complacent with this topic.
Mhm.
And as I was talking to Victoria about wanting to do this, I really wanted this to be very focused on truly working for God and not just saying that you do, and it being something that's actually important, because we all have things that we do. You could be a student, you could be a stay-at-home mom, you could have a full-time job, you could have several part-time jobs.
Mhm.
Whatever your situation, we are tasked to do something on the earth. But our lifespan on the earth is so short. We were just reading in James
Mhm.
about how we're like a mist, like a vapor that's
Mhm.
here today, gone tomorrow. Is that Mercy Me or Casting Crowns? I always get it mixed up.
Casting crowns, I think.
Probably Casting Crowns. Um, yeah, our life is so short, and
Yeah.
we could spend it putting all of our energy into our earthly jobs and focusing on what we're doing here. And
Yeah.
if you're building a business, trying to increase your sales and putting everything you can into that. Or if you're a parent, spending all your time worrying about your kids' activities and how to get them from A to B and
Mhm.
trying to give them everything you never had. There are so many ways we could spend our energy and our time, but God is calling us to put Him first and to remember that we are not simply an employee of XYZ Corporation. We're not
Mhm.
simply a stay-at-home mom. That is our like part-time job, if you will, but our eternal job is to work for God and it's to
Right.
glorify Him. And we are, in essence, employed by God. So I've given the example before of the CIA. If you work for the Central Intelligence Agency here in the U.S., you are sent, or really any intelligence agency, you're sent to another country, and you have a cover job, and you work
Mhm.
that job. You're still expected to deliver certain things. You still have to like be good at that job, but that's not your real job. Your real job is to be a spy,
Mhm.
or to work for the government. Just like we are given a set of tasks and responsibilities, we have to provide for our families. If you're especially, men, that's our job. Like if you go back to the very beginning of the Bible,
Mhm.
God says, Adam, you're going to have to work for your food. You're going to have to work to provide for your family. And that toil is a part of what we are called to do. And so the first check here is that this is necessary, that we have an earthly job.
Mhm.
It's not out of vanity. It's not out of just choosing something other than God.
Mhm.
Um, but then we also have a responsibility that is longer term. And that if we are called to be like Christ, we have to put ourselves in a different frame of mind that is more eternal. And we have another job to do. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about how those two things mesh, where we see people go wrong, and then just where we've seen that in our own lives.
Mhm.
But I guess to start, in terms of your life, Victoria, and we haven't pre-talked about these questions, so I just want to ask her.
Oh, great.
In terms of your life and going from student to full-time employed worker, do you feel like you have had times where it has seemed less important, or has it always been very important that like all of your energy is focused on your earthly job, or has it gotten more important as you've gotten older?
Your earthly job?
Yeah. Like has it gone through waves of seeming less important? Have you gotten perspective over periods of time where you've pulled back a little bit? Or has it always been just increasing?
That's a really good question. I kind of feel like it's both. I know that sounds weird, but like growing up and into college, I feel like a lot of my identity was found in being a student because your
Hmm.
whole life, I mean, that's what you've done your entire life. So I didn't know for the first 22 years of my life anything different. So if you're currently in college or grad school right now, you know that feeling where your whole like life is wrapped up into your schooling right now
Hmm.
and you don't really see anything else but that. So there's that aspect of it where I was doing well in school, not necessarily for the Lord, but for my own like gratification, I guess, and selfish ambition of like, yes, I'm doing well. Like, I will study so that I can do well on this test and perform well and get good grades. That's just something that was always important to me. But then on the flip side of that, I do feel this steady increase as I've gotten older to work hard for my earthly job,
Hmm.
transitioning from student to full-time employee. I have felt more emphasis on what I'm doing in the here and now instead of thinking about how I'm building God's kingdom here. And I obviously jobs are necessary, like you're talking about, but I do think it can be a huge distraction, especially if you're an achiever and a learner like Nicholas. Like you're always like striving for more and better and
Hmm.
growth and all these things that are good, but when framed in the wrong perspective and doing it for the wrong reasons, even the purest of your intentions and doing wanting to do good could be in vain because you're not doing it for the Lord. And
Right.
that sounds so cliche, like, oh, do it for the Lord. Like you were saying, you'll be blessed and the Lord will be with you and all these things. But it really is true.
Hmm.
And I just know, like, in my life, looking back at all the times that I've done things my way and tried to do good for me or for someone else, it's never truly given me that satisfaction. And
Hmm.
it's only until I try to reframe how I think about things and why I'm really here and what my purpose is that I really start to understand my life, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like you were saying, our life is just a vapor. Like it's here today and gone tomorrow. Like in the blink of an eye, we will be dead.
Hmm.
And that sounds morbid, but it is what it is. And I was listening to actually a podcast a couple weeks ago, and she's a Christian. She's really great. I love listening to her, but she said that for whatever reason, as humans, we're like so shocked by death. Like we know that that the moment somebody breathes their first breath, they will breathe their last breath too.
Mm.
And even though we know that, and it's like, duh, of course, death still hurts when it happens and it's still a shock to us. And it still is like, wow, so confusing, especially when someone dies young. And it's just so funny how it's
Hmm.
such a like, I don't know, far off notion to us that we're like,
Hmm.
wow, that's crazy. But yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know where I was going with that,
Well, that's
but
true. And we're in the span of being born till whenever we do breathe our last breath. It's so quick, and
yeah.
we don't have time to waste.
Mhm.
Um, but the other part of this equation is, okay, what if I agree and I know that I need to live in a way that I have two jobs
Mhm.
and I'm able to do both of them? How do I have the energy to do that? If we're called to work on earth,
Mhm.
how do I have the energy to do a job for God as well? And how do I balance that? And I know that's been a challenge in my life, and I'm
Mhm.
sure in your life. We just get busy. And there's so
Mhm.
many things that we're asked to do, and There's lots of things we want to do too. But how do we work in what God wants and make it a part of our overall, calling? And I think the first thing that I learned that really helped was found here in the Bible. So in Colossians 3:23,
Mm-hmm.
it really talks about something that I think it needs to be refreshed in your memory every single day, because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter what your circumstance, it's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So it says, whatever you do, do it from the heart as something done for the Lord and not for people, knowing that you will receive the reward of inheritance from the Lord. You serve the Lord Christ. That verse has meant a lot to me. I heard it for the first time when my parents told me, because I was being lazy and I needed a kick in the butt to start working hard. But you also need to apply it, not just about working hard, but working hard for the Lord, because you serve the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the time that I spend trying to impress humans with what I do, trying to rationalize how I can be better in the eyes of humans, that energy and time spent is kind of wasted. Like when Jesus was a carpenter, that was his earthly job, and he did it for 2 decades probably.
Mm-hmm.
He was spending time working with his hands, working hard. He was doing something that was necessary at that time to help provide for the family, but he wasn't spending his time trying to impress people with his work. He wasn't trying to make a name for himself as the best carpenter. He was working hard, but in
Mm-hmm.
his mind, this was only his temporary job. His earthly job was to do something that none of us could do, which is go to the cross and bear our sin and die for us, and then just defeat death and raise to life.
Yeah.
But his entire ministry, I think, was a really good depiction of how you kind of have this underlying job for God, but then you sprinkle in your earthly job over top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in my own life, the way that I can apply that is doing something we talk about a lot on the podcast, which is zooming out and remembering how my life is, this tiny, it's this short, and how every second that I devote to an earthly job it can be good, but it also is finite. There's an
Mm-hmm.
end to it. So many people put their identity, and you talked about this, identity in their job. And then when they lose their job or
Mm-hmm.
they
I was
retire,
gonna say that. Yeah.
it's
It's
gone,
yeah. It's like the world is ending.
Yeah.
It really does shake you up, because you are finding your identity and your purpose in life in just a job description.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how respected you are or how high
Mm-hmm.
up you are.
Mm-hmm.
It always makes me laugh. In my particular profession, I work with a lot of other companies. And so you can kind of meet some of the people that work in the company, and you get a feel for their structure. And it's kind of like a little bubble, So people in the bubble, there's levels and there's the higher ups, but the person who's the very top of that ladder in that little bubble doesn't mean so much to me, because I'm in a different bubble. So it's funny to me in this little like microcosm of our society, how someone is just so revered and respected, but then to someone else means nothing.
That's a really good point.
And it further illustrates to me that, what are we doing? If I spend my
Yeah.
life trying to get to that top rung of the ladder,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't matter. Like someone in South Africa is not going to respect my name because I got to the top in the state of Tennessee, in a company. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, even if I am someone like Alexander the Great or someone whose name that has been in history, that's still, it's so finite, and it will only last so long.
Mm-hmm.
All of our ambitions end in nothing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, you look throughout the Bible, and people, when it talks about someone's profession, like a fisherman or a tax collector, like they say that as like a descriptor or for the purpose of Jesus, calling out even the least of these and
Mhm.
hanging around with sinners and those types of things. But that's the only time it's mentioned. And then it moves on to who they were, the story that they're involved in, what they did, how they interacted with Jesus, what they did with others. And point being, they're not completely just defined by their title.
Mhm.
It's far more far reaching than that. It goes on to explain what they did for the kingdom.
Right.
So they may say so and so, the fisherman, but then what did they do besides just being a fisherman?
Yeah.
How did they point others to Christ?
Yeah.
How did by their life be an example to others and to his faithfulness? The contrary to what you were saying, I think we view work a little differently. And who would you say that if you're not consciously working for the Lord, who would you say you're working for? Like what?
I would say ultimately you're working for yourself.
No, I mean like you specifically. You would say
Oh, me
yourself.
specifically.
Yeah.
If I'm not working,
that was a good answer. I feel like that
well,
makes sense.
yeah, because it's out of selfishness. So if I say I'm not working for the Lord, even in the moments where I'm trying to increase the value of my company, or I'm trying to, do other work that's helping other people, it ultimately comes back to me because I'm trying to make myself
That's a
better,
really good point.
promoting myself, or even if I'm doing the trap I kind of fall into, which is just spending time poring over things and trying to learn it and increase my knowledge. If that's not for the Lord, then it's for me. And it's just to make me feel important or make me feel like I know more or I'm in control.
Yeah.
So it ultimately in my life is me. What would you say?
I mean, I think you're right. It all does point back to just selfishness, and that's just the nature of our humanness and our sin. Like it really does. Like any answer that you would fill in the blank for that, like what you're working for, I think it does ultimately point back to ourselves. But the reason why I asked that is because the verse I think it's right before the one that you read, the whatever you do, do it for the Lord. It's Colossians 3 verse 22 says, slaves, obey your human masters in everything. Don't work only while being watched as people pleasers, but work wholeheartedly, fearing the Lord. So that verse, I don't think I had ever read that because everyone harps so much on Colossians 3:23, which is a great verse. And thinking about the verses in the Bible that point to working for the Lord, there really aren't like a ton, except for in this chapter throughout, it mentions a couple different variations of 3:23. But I found it interesting that I had never really dissected the verse right before it. And I think that's why I need to like read, when I'm reading, I need to read like the whole chapter to get like the real context of it all.
Yeah.
But I found it really interesting that the verse right before talks about like, don't just work so that people can look at you and be like, wow, and you can get the recognition or you can please someone else and they'll think that you're so great. It's not about that. And that for me really resonated because that is what I have always, if I'm being honest, that's who I've been working for is other people, to please them, to make them proud of me. And again, it goes back to I'm working for myself. This is a selfish thing that I'm doing, and I'm not wholeheartedly working for the Lord, fearing him along the way, and trying to point others to him through just my everyday job, my 8 to 5. Like it's so much more than that. And I don't know if you guys know, but Nicholas and I are actually coworkers now. We work at the same place. It just started like 2 months ago, one and a half, something like that. But on our way home from work, we'll talk about what we did that day. But then more than that, I feel like we've been lately challenging each other, like, well, how did that conversation with so and so go? Or how could you be a light to them because we know they're not a believer? Or it's just so much more than just how'd your presentation go? Or
Mm-hmm.
did you get this done today? It's been really neat because being at the same place, we know everything that's going on really. So we're able to talk about each other's workload and know exactly what that means. But even more than that, we're able to visibly see each other being a light and challenge each other and call each other higher to how can you do more? How can you reach out to this person? How can you be a light to so and so?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just been really neat and
Yeah.
keeping both of us in check and keeping us accountable to the Word of God and really fulfilling our purpose here. And it's great if Nicholas, does a really good job and gets more sales or whatever it is you do. But more than that, like, what are you doing to impact where you work and the people that you work with?
Right.
How are you reflecting Jesus and not just by wearing your WWJD bracelet? Oh my gosh, you have
I'm
it
wearing
on.
it. That's a really good point. And so, kind of just to reframe what you're saying, part of our responsibility is to integrate our heavenly job into our earthly job.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily mean I have to serve at a soup kitchen outside of work,
Right,
but then I do this other job.
Or quit your job and move to another country to be a missionary. Like, this is one big facade I always had in my head, that to reach lost people, you have to go to a different country. I think I believed that in middle school, but still, that's so not true, because the older I get, the more I see how lost Americans are and how lost really successful and thriving countries really are, Yeah. It's not just the third world countries. We all have fallen short of the glory of God. And we all, apart from Christ, can do nothing. Apart from the vine, we bear no fruit. We can do nothing without him. So that goes for any country. And no matter what position you find yourself in, we all need him.
Yeah. There's such an opportunity. The cool thing is, you are not where you are by mistake. So if you're wondering, okay, how I don't have time, maybe I'm in law school, and I know I have friends that have done that, family that has done that. You have no time, right? You can't do anything, and that goes for any higher education. You are not at your particular law school by mistake, and realistically, you are in proximity to people that Victoria and I, or other Christians, are not in proximity to.
Right.
So everywhere that you are, whether it's a normal job or school or even just being a stay-at-home mom, you are in proximity to a very particular group of people. And that is how we can work for the Lord within our job, is that we can witness to them both through our actions and our words. Sometimes that means we're just starting to get into friendships with them and get past the entry level. But then other times that means serving them and helping them with our actions. There's some really, really neat stories that have come out of those friendships in your job, where someone is able to be there for someone else, and that's what leads them to Christ. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily mean, like you're saying, you have to travel to a third world country, or you have to do something spectacular. I mean, so much of our lives are lived in our job, our earthly job, but it's the perspective that counts. So if I'm spending all of my time thinking about the reports I have to get in or the calls I need to make, how much time am I spending thinking about the lost people at my work, or among my clients, or at my school? Or even if you're a stay-at-home mom and maybe your kids play with other kids and you're around other parents, there might be other parents that are not believers. So how can you speak into their lives? There are so many situations where if we were thinking about our real job, we would interact with someone differently than we do because we're just so cluttered with our earthly job. It really does take a mental change, a mental shift from this is the job I have to do to now thinking about the Bible and how so many people in the Bible used their earthly job to work with and among people that were lost.
Right.
There's so many opportunities. I was telling Victoria earlier too, I am very passionate about fitness. So I'm going to use a fitness example. Whenever I do an ab workout, they're usually about 5 minutes. So I'm working my core and doing different exercises. And many times I will admit that is my least favorite thing to do. I don't like to do it.
I don't think many people do.
Yeah.
It's really not fun to work out your abs.
Some people would say that just the whole body is not fun. But whenever I put it off to the end, I never do it because I'm just too busy with my other workout thing. And then I get to the end, I'm like, I can't really do it. I'm too tired. I don't have the energy, don't have the time. Maybe you make up other excuses and it doesn't end up getting done. But what I found was when I put a 5-minute ab workout before my other stuff, I end up having more energy to do it. I'm more dedicated to it. I enjoy it more. And what's cool about doing abs before you work out is it turns on your core, and your core provides stability for your body. So any other exercise that I do, I'm now more stable and then safer. So it actually helps me do my other workouts better than if I had not done it. And what I feel is the challenge with having an earthly job and a heavenly job is that we tend to prioritize the things that we can see and put those things first. And then we get to the end of the day and we don't have the energy or time to think about this. And my advice to people out there and to myself is that we have to prioritize that first. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time. I think the common misconception about having a heavenly job is it has to be so involved and take so much time. And I think the reality is it really doesn't. God knows that we have things that we have to do on earth, but we also are able to spend time in the Word. We're able to pray. We're able to worship Him in small sections of our day, and that can many times be plenty to set our minds on heavenly things. I mean, Colossians 3:2, set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. We're supposed to start our days, start the process of thinking about what we have to do with this, and then we'll find that we actually have enough time for both.
Yeah,
and that this and thinking about our heavenly job will actually help us do our earthly job better.
that's a really good point. And like starting your day thinking about this. And I think in a way that almost makes it easier to see opportunities throughout your day to be a light.
Yeah.
And, because you don't ever want to be that person like, I think they did this in like the 90s or something where Christians would go door to door like, do you know Jesus? And, so I think those types of conversations kind of make us cringe and we're like, that's not the way to do it, at least not these days. But I don't necessarily think that it even needs to look like that. I think that there's a reason why the saying is your actions speak louder than your words. There's so much truth to that. And just the way that you treat someone or the way that you remember things about them and the things that are important to them, that speaks volumes on not just God's character in you, but just the way that we're called to love His people. That's incredible. Think about someone that you have a conversation with, and the next time you see them, you bring up something that you'd mentioned in that last conversation, and they act like they don't know what you're talking about because they didn't like remember
Yeah.
that thing about you, and you kind of feel crummy, like, oh well, I guess they don't really care enough to remember that thing about me that kind of makes me me, and that's important to me. But then you talk to someone like Nicholas, and he remembers every single thing about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember everything. I remember when we were dating, he would bring up previous conversations, things that I said in previous conversations that I wouldn't even remember that I said. And I was just astounded by that. Like, people notice those types of things in the way that we care for them. And I was telling Nicholas the other day in the car, I think that if we took some of the focus that we put on everything else in this life and like shifted that energy to just loving people well, loving God's people well, all these other stressors and anxieties and worries will just begin to like fall off.
Mhm.
And I'm speaking to myself too when I say that. We get so caught up in like the little things and the things that people do that annoy us, or so and so made you mad, or you really don't like working with that person on your project. Those things can really cloud your judgment and create resentment and bitterness when that's keeping you from really loving them and loving them well. And that ultimately is going to show the love of Christ through you more than anything that you could probably say to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways.
Yeah. No,
that's just one way that you could be a light.
You're right.
where
Yeah.
you work.
It's through our words and our actions, and it's the smallest things.
Mhm.
It really is just remembering something
Yeah.
about someone, because you have to break down barriers, and God will use you in ways that you can't imagine. So
Mhm.
don't spend time worrying about, am I doing everything that God wants me to do today?
Right.
Am I making progress towards helping this person learn more about Jesus? Don't worry about that.
Mhm.
You don't need to take the same mentality that you have for your normal job and apply it to your heavenly job, because it will be
Mhm.
different. The mentality you have to bring is, I'm going to do everything as though working for the Lord and not human masters. I'm going
Mhm.
to do this project so well, and I'm going to do it in a way that's humble, that when I get the praise for it, I'm able to not just make it increase my self-worth, but drive people to look at Jesus. I'm able to interact with my coworkers in a way that builds them up and makes them feel better, that they're in a better situation when they walk away from my desk than when they walked to my desk.
Mm.
It's those little things
Mhm.
that come from spending time thinking about your heavenly job and remembering that that's the thing that will be the most important in the end. That you're able to start your day like that. You're able to start your day remembering who you are, what you're supposed to be doing. And then when you're going through your earthly job, you'll find little moments, little pockets where you can bring in Jesus, and you can
Mhm.
increase people's, uh, you know, joy and knowledge of God. And there's, there's just so many opportunities. And I feel like
Definitely.
it takes a while to have that perspective. But once you have it, it's like a light switch. It completely changes how you see everything. And suddenly the things that you hated doing at work are not the things you hate doing anymore.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's so true. I was doing laundry the other day, and I was folding Nicholas's shirts, and I thought, I really don't like doing this. And then in that same moment, I thought, I really am so blessed to do this because I have a husband who loves the Lord, who loves me, takes great care of us, who's going to be a great leader of our family one day. Well, is now, but one day when we have kids, Lord willing. Um, and like, what a blessing that is, that I get to fold his shirts and fold his socks. That is, yeah, just the way that you frame the work that you're doing, those mundane things, like you're saying, the things that you
Hmm.
don't want to do, viewing it the way that the Lord does, and being so thankful that you have a job and
Hmm.
have a brain to learn more things and go to school to further your education to make an impact in this world. that is such a blessing. And it's really important for us to take those thoughts captive when we start feeling annoyed or frustrated, and really seeing how this is such a blessing in your life. And
Yeah.
you don't deserve this, but the Lord freely gives these gifts to us, and it's incredible. But one more thing that I wanted to say was, and I just forgot it. Hold on.
Mhm.
Don't start humming, then I will then I'll never remember it. What were we just saying?
I'll take this moment just to say, as we go through our days and as we are planning out the things that we like to do, that we have to do, it's okay to think about earthly things. And we're certainly not saying time that you spend planning for your
Actual job.
or,
Yeah.
or cleaning your house or whatever is wasted time.
Right.
But it has to be secondary to our heavenly job. And you have to calibrate how much of your mind goes to that. Um, and going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning about being present, that's something that can really help too.
Right.
Making time to plan things out and taking time to say, okay, I'm going to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes thinking about and writing down things that will happen that I will be doing. But then the rest of the day, I'm just going to be very present. And you'll find that some of the anxiety of things that are nagging you for the rest of your day in your earthly job, they'll kind of go away, and you have a little bit of empty space that you can now fill it with heavenly job things and thinking about as you're doing a presentation, like, what could I bring into this presentation that would speak life into these people that are watching it? How can I work with my coworkers to better their lives and make sure they understand that I have the joy of Christ in my heart? You can free up some space by not spending your time thinking about the future, because we're not guaranteed that. We're a vapor.
I thought you said a baber.
A vapor?
A vapor. You said a vapor. Okay. Well, yeah, those are all really good points. You speak so eloquently. But I remembered what I was going to say.
Nice.
So a while ago, I think it was a pastor I heard say that Christians should be the most hardworking people on the earth. And that really is true, because if we truly are believers following Christ and doing everything for Him and for His glory, then we should be working really hard at everything that we do.
Yeah.
In our job, and when we come home, and raising our families and serving in church. I mean, everything that we do should be done so well and with so much diligence and hard work, because it's not for our own glory, it's for His. And we're not working hard just to impress our coworker or move up in the company or get our boss to compliment us. It's for God. At the end of the day, it's all for Him. So anyways, that was just all I was going to say.
No, I think
that was a point that I forgot.
That's a really good way to end the conversation. We talked about a lot of things work. I wouldn't say that I did such a great job outlining this in a way that makes sense, but
what do you mean?
We just kind of jumped around a little bit.
Well, yeah.
Which is okay. We're just chatting.
We're just having a conversation. I think it's okay to jump
This is
around.
how our conversations go when we're just talking.
Yeah, we have a lot of conversations.
That's how this podcast started. Yeah.
I was going to say, which is why we're here today, because we were like, wow, we should film and record these conversations, because they're just so good and so fruitful, and I love the things that we talk about.
Yeah.
So
me too.
hopefully you got something out of it. But
yeah.
I know it's always really encouraging to me to remind myself of these things, because I can so easily lose my purpose and why I'm here and truly what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So it's always really encouraging to have these conversations and remind myself of all of that.
That's right. Yeah. You have to bring it back to center. Recalibrate. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening and watching. If you watch this on YouTube, if you haven't already seen our YouTube channel, go check it out. A few of you have, but definitely if you'd like to see us in person, I guess it's not in person, but on a screen, you can pretend like you're out sitting in the audience that doesn't exist.
Very nice.
Head over to our YouTube channel. It is Life in the Right Lane, and Layne is spelled with a Y. And we are, of course, continuing to release this on all of the major podcast platforms. So if that's where you're listening, you can stay right where you are. No need to change. But I think that pretty much covers it. We're going to be doing a little recap next week. We are just about to hit our 1-year wedding anniversary. Can't believe that.
Wow.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about what did that first year of marriage look like? What is our impression of it? What was hard? What was easy? We had it in the middle of a weird time, so maybe that influences a little bit, but stick around for that. And I think that'll be fun just to go back through what the last year has looked like.
Whew, it's been crazy.
Yes,
it's been a crazy one, I think, for all of us, no matter if you got married or not.
Yeah, it has been. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks, guys, and keep living life in the right way.